Welcome to the Courage to Live podcast. My name is Josh Bitsko. I'm a retired police captain with 24 years of experience out of Las Vegas. Currently, I travel the country and I teach people about courage, leadership, and resilience. I'm joined with my wife, Jenna.
Hi.
And in today's podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about fear. Now, I've touched on it on a couple different podcasts that we've done. But like a perfect example, in our last podcast, it was our anniversary that she kind of springed on me when she brought it up. And I'll tell you, I had a fear response to that.
Did I spring it on you?
I mean, in my defense, I hadn't even looked at the date. I know when our anniversary is. I just didn't know that day was the date of our anniversary.
Yeah. I mean, that happens to most men, right?
Yeah. Although I will say there's a dynamic in our relationship where I generally remember like dates and anniversaries.
You are very good at that.
Maybe a little more.
That's true. That's true. That's
but
fair.
You caught me slipping.
Did.
So
it happens.
Yeah. And
happy Halloween. Almost
Halloween.
Almost Halloween.
We know what we're going to be this year yet?
No.
We've had some pretty good costumes in the past.
We have. We were Morticia and Gomez Adams.
Mm-hmm.
What else have we been?
You don't remember?
See? This proves your point.
One of my favorite ones, you were Velma and I was Shaggy.
Oh, yes.
I like that one.
Yep.
And then we had Poison Ivy and Bane, but we ended up not dressing up that year. I don't know if it was cold or
I was actually pregnant and very, very sick.
That's right.
And we ended up losing that baby right around that time.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but I couldn't dress up because I was throwing up.
Yeah, you were not
in a good place.
Not doing well. You ate a lot of bean and cheese burritos in that period.
Every meal.
That's all you could keep down.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So when we talk about fear, I think it's good to at least have a basic understanding of what fear is, right? So, because if you can't define it and you can't identify it in yourself, how do you navigate through it to make decisions? I was a police officer for 24 years, and there were multiple times in my career that I encountered fear.
Well, and it's such an overarching big theme of your book. You talk about it in multiple different ways in your book, and not in the sense of, do it scared. It's very much in the sense of, here's different ways in your life that you can encounter fear, different kinds of fear, how to overcome it based on personal experience. And so fear's such a big topic. We honestly had a really hard time figuring out how exactly to break it down to talk about it, but we want to do it in 3 parts. So a 3-part series, if you will. Yeah. On fear. So we're going to do fear in policing / fear of your own mortality, because that's something that first responders have to feel more than normal people on a regular basis. And we want to do an episode on fear in leadership and business. So whether you're a first responder, whether you're a business person, if you have a job, you're going to encounter fear at some point. So what that looks like in leadership and business and career. And then our 3rd episode we want to do on fear in your personal life.
Yeah. And I just think, yes, it did take us a bit to think about how we were going to break this up and deliver it. And, I think all of those are very valid ways to approach fear, because there's also a stigma with being afraid, right? It's not really manly, or it's just one, especially in the first responder community, you don't ever want to admit that you're afraid. And I think that that's unrealistic, because there are times when you are asked or have to do something that is going to be scary. And I think that like the biggest example for me in my career, and I've had a lot of other incidents that I've been involved in where I felt that fear and then the subsequent shame that came along with feeling fear. But and I touched on this in our the episode, The Night Las Vegas Changed, talking about 1 October. But I think when people think about that incident, they're like, oh, breaching a door and going in after this guy and all these things, it was scary.
And it was, right?
It was, although those are, very intense things. That was a known thing for me because in K9, we spent a lot of time searching for armed suspects, right? So, but for me, the biggest sticking point for fear was the room service cart that the suspect had left in front of the door. And we all thought that was a bomb. And there were reasons for that. There were wires going from the cart underneath the door into the suspect's room. And when it comes to explosives, I mean, I'd done training on them. I worked bomb dogs. So there is a distinct lack of control there. Like, you don't have control over whether this is going to explode or not. And since we had to go past that to breach the door because we didn't have any of the, resources in a timely manner to address it, didn't have time to call a bomb squad or go grab a bomb dog. You're just kind of hoping that this doesn't explode and honestly expecting it to explode and expecting yourself, expecting to die in that moment. I mean, there's no other way to put it. And knowing that if that does happen, you're clearing a path for the next team to get in there.
So before you go on, what does that feel like? Because not many humans have to, and I say not many humans, I'm meaning people that don't work as first responders. And even there's first responders that will never have to experience that, depending on what their role is, right? So what does that feel like when you are faced with your own mortality, that level of fear? What's going through your mind? What are you thinking about? What are you feeling?
So I would love to tell you that, I was like, I could die, but we have to do this. And like, had this internal dialogue with myself about, bravery and courage. But it was more an internal battle of like feeling dread and then shoving it down because I don't got time for that. And then feeling dread and then like, nope, shoving it down. Like honestly, it was like I was trying to ignore it because we made the decision. This is what we're doing. But it was like flashes of a very intense emotion and then an internal struggle to like shove that down. So you didn't have to feel it because I was trying to, I was honestly trying to acknowledge it and release it, but I didn't do it. And I haven't been teaching that or training that, but rather than release it, I was just trying to like avoid that thought. And there was a struggle there. We were able to get through it. I was able to get through it because we were able to breach the door and it turned out not to be a bomb. But in that moment, we were sure it was because, like I said, that coupled with the amount of gunfire raining down into the crowd, the multiple calls coming in because you had the ghost calls of people evacuating and ending up in other casinos. So we thought, that this makes sense with a coordinated attack is what it sounded like at the time, not knowing it was just a single suspect in a room. But that fear, feeling it at that level, being confronted with your own mortality, having to make a decision that nobody wants to make. There are processes and procedures in dealing with an explosive, how I was trained and, the policies that the department has for dealing with an explosive, but we had to bypass those. We had to just, no, we can't do any of that. All these things that are set in place to keep us safe, we can't do because this is such a outlier of an incident. We know the right thing to do is to continue pushing forward. So it had just a severe impact obviously at the moment, but I couldn't let that consume me because I still had to be at my best if we're going to go in a room looking for, someone that we know is highly armed. And then in the long term, I mean, I still have nightmares about that cart. Of everything that happened that night, everything that happened since, those are that changed me forever. And it has, like I say all the time, those of us that went up to that floor and went in that room came down different people. I'm glad that I can take those experiences and put them in a book and maybe help people and other first responders and just normal people through that. But when you look at it logically, okay, there was not a bomb. That cart was just cameras. But so why do I still have these intense emotions surrounding it? Because I can logically look at, okay, I went through that. That turned out not to be an explosive. It was just cameras. Why is it still keep me up at night? Why is it still causing these nightmares? Well, because the fear is such an intense emotion. It's that survival emotion. And then to not, let that emotion make the decision for you.
Well, yeah, because what you wanted to do in that moment was probably leave.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I wanted to go through all the policies and training and procedures to deal with this as I've done every other time on a suspicious package or, a suspected device or even real devices that I've found in my time in K9 and all of that. Like, okay, we back off. We have a whole way that we handle those. But yeah, I wanted to not be standing there right then.
Yeah. And so you're fighting against that emotion. You're fighting against that, your body that has evolved with a fight or flight response, right? Mm-hmm. To keep you out of danger, and it's screaming at you and you're ignoring it and going against it. And so I can imagine that's probably extremely intense, and probably, I would assume, afterwards, there's probably a whole level of shame to it, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. Because it didn't feel like how I thought it would feel having been a cop for so long. I've been in danger before. I've been shot at before. I'd kicked doors and served search warrants and barricades and hostages and all that stuff. And even through those moments, there was fear. Don't get me wrong. Like, we do scary things, but it wasn't as intense as that was. And I think there's a couple of things, because the gravity of the situation, right? Knowing what we were on. And on top of that, the lack of control, right? And like not having the ability to fight this specific danger. Like, I have a certain level of confidence when I'm clearing a room or in a fight because I've trained for both of those things. But here it's like you don't have control. So I think that's why it impacted. It almost like rewires parts of your brain. Like your body learns that fear, and then that can come up at other times because it was such a intense moment and such an intense feeling. And, I think you have a traumatic incident. It doesn't have to be maybe this intense for your body to remember and then bring up those emotions, right? Like something happens that affects you or impacts you, and you feel fear. And even like someone that's been in a car accident, you've been in a car accident and you felt that fear, and then now you're back on the road again and someone swerves into your lane or something like that can bring up those hard emotions. And so the same thing for this, for me, is again, it was just so impactful. And then there was shame, and then shame of, why am I letting this bother me? It wasn't even a bomb. Like it was. And that is one thing that writing the book helped me when I was putting words down, is I wrote down, like, the cart wasn't a bomb, but the fear was real. And it just shows the impact that fear can have on you.
Well, and I think there's an added layer for first responders and men, right? That feeling fear as a first responder, you're not supposed to. And if you do, you're not cut out for this job. And we see that in people on social media when they are replying to some of your things or like posts that you have, and it's, well, I would have done this or I would have done that. And it's like, well, and until you're in that moment, it's easy to say that, but I feel like there's just this, level with first responders where you're not allowed to feel fear. And if you do, then you're in your own head of, I'm not cut out for this job. And then on top of that, as men, right? You're not, as a man, you're supposed to be, this tough and protector and all of these things. And if you feel fear, then, that's shameful for you as a man too.
Well, yeah. And I think that the big part of being able to navigate through fear and making those decisions is letting go of the shame that comes with it, because we're human and you're going to feel fear. It's how you respond to it that matters. It's not letting that fear paralyze you or cause you to run away, or, the variety of responses that you can have. But the true courage is being able to feel those things, understanding that you're feeling it, and then act and keep moving forward. And it took me sitting down and writing a book, and because I knew this is how I felt about it, to really put the words down on paper to have a better understanding of it. They say like journaling is great for trauma and great for, your mental health. And I've tried at other times to journal, but until I'm actually writing a book and putting, my experiences down on paper and how I responded and what I teach, it really helped me organize, even how I felt in that moment. Because the first time that I was kind of surprised is I was doing an interview with the investigators after the 1 October shooting. And I was going through I'd done so many of those interviews because I had bad luck of being involved in critical incidents. And I was just going through the numbers and all that. And then I started talking about the cart and I got emotional, and it shocked me because that wasn't anything that I'd ever done, especially in an interview like that. And it just shows the impact. Again, I'm emotional about this thing and this feeling that I had, even though it wasn't really a bomb. I was never in danger of that blowing up.
Well, and I think, but too, coming to accept, and you teach this now when you go around the country teaching your class, that fear is a natural human emotion. And I think for whatever reason, because it's been so stigmatized in the first responder community, that's really hard for people to accept. But once you can accept that fear is a normal human emotion and you are going to feel it, you're able to then accept, okay, yes, I am feeling afraid in this moment, but here's what I'm going to do about it, right? It's training your brain. It's training the mental side of being a first responder.
Well, yeah. And it comes also with understanding, like, what is fear? Fear is your mind and body's response to a real or perceived threat. And also identifying what courage is. Because if you have this warped sense of courage, meaning you don't feel fear and you're always this stoic, like robot that doesn't feel anything, then that's going to be hard to overcome when you are feeling those things. And I did have a distorted version of courage throughout a lot of my life of, no, I'm not supposed to feel fear. I'm not supposed to feel these things. And it wasn't until I repeatedly was in similar situations like that, maybe not quite as intense, that I had to change my perspective of like, courage isn't not feeling fear. Courage is, to keep going and persevere when you're feeling these intense emotions. Because yes, we evolved to have this survival emotion to protect us from danger. If something happens, I know I need to run away, or I need to fight, or I need to, do whatever it is to survive in a given situation. Where that in policing is, you have to go against that feeling sometimes. And if we're not training our cops to do that, if we're not training our cops to navigate through the hard emotion, rather than we just don't talk about it because you shouldn't be afraid, because you know what you signed up for, we put a badge on your chest, a gun on your hip, and you're no longer supposed to be afraid, then we're doing them a disservice. And I think that, as we're now finally having the right conversations about mental health in the first responder community, that this next conversation is also about how to manage these emotions in the moment. Because we also know that if you fail, or you have all this shame surrounding your actions or decisions because of fear, then that has an intense impact on your mental health afterwards. I mean, better than most, think about how much just that incident affected me. And I was able to push through the hard emotions. But, what if I didn't? Now I have the shame of feeling the fear, and also the shame of not acting.
Right.
And so finding ways, and that's, I think, what I've done in the book and what we do in our class, of helping people regulate their emotions in those moments, I think can really change how we approach critical incidents in policing in general?
Well, because I think what not a lot of people realize, especially as a first responder, is so you saw the majority when people are having a fear response, it wasn't first responders. Some of them do, some of them turn around and go the other way. Some of them just don't show up, right? Like that does happen sometimes, but mostly it's people freezing, right?
Yeah, I've seen that firsthand.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So the majority of the time it's going to be freezing. And so I think also recognizing that as a first responder in yourself, if that is your natural inclination when you feel fear to freeze, accepting that this is a normal human response, but working, and you have to put the work in yourself to know that that's your response and know ways to mitigate that and know what to do in the moment so that when you feel like you want to freeze, you're able to mentally work through that. Because if you're not preparing yourself and you're not putting the work into yourself to not only tactically train, but mentally train, then the tactics only matter to a certain point, right?
Yeah, the tactics are the what to do, but the mental training is how to do it. And no, the response, you brought this up in the beginning, is just do it scared. Like there's so much anecdotal, like whether it's on social media or experts, quote unquote, that will say, oh, we'll just do the hard thing scared. Well, what we're trying to figure out is how do I do that? Because one of the biggest questions I think, law enforcement officers specifically have is how am I going to respond on an active shooter? Because obviously that's a super low frequency. I mean, there's on average, 35 a year, give or take. And there's over 1 million law enforcement officers. So how many will actually have to go on a legitimate active shooter incident in their career? But that is what we are preparing for because it has such devastating effects in a community and so much loss of life. And, it's not you're at a car on a car stop and a gun comes out and you have to react. It's I'm outside this door and I need to know what I need to do to go in and stop this from happening, stop people from dying. And, I don't know what I'm going to do until I'm in it. What's one of the problems that we're trying to solve in what we teach is, okay, based on research, based on my experiences, based on other people's experiences, these are the emotions that you're more than likely going to feel, fear being a big one. And here's how you push through it. So you can answer that question as best as you can before you're confronted with it. Because again, I know I had that question for most of my career. Like, what am I going to do if it's an active shooter? I know what I need to do, but am I going to be able to do it in that moment when my heart is beating out of my chest and I'm confronted with my own mortality and I don't want to fail. I have a fear of failure and, that fracturing my identity of who I am as a cop. Because yes, being a police officer is a career, it's a job, but it's also a calling. I think the people that approach it right take what they're doing seriously, and it's a big part of their identity. And if they're going to be in a situation where their actions don't align with that identity, like how do you live with yourself afterwards? So we're trying to help people get there, trying to help people figure that out.
Well, and I think if you're a first responder and your first inclination is to critique everybody else's responses about what you would do in that scenario, I think you're probably first in line to get some mental training because you don't know until you're there, right? If you're not prepared.
Yeah. And I mean, I've done told this story and done debriefings even before we started our business and with the class. And you'd be surprised that people come up and what they said to me, like, oh, I would have just leaned out in the hallway and started shooting through the door. Or, everybody has an idea of what they would do, but they don't have an idea of what they're going to feel.
Right.
And even though I had been on so many critical incidents before this and so many since, I was still surprised at some of my reactions and some of my emotional reactions. and me trying to mask my own fear as a leader to try and bring my team down and calm them down too. Like there's that aspect of it, which we'll talk more in, when we get into the fear and leadership, but it's a very complicated and nuanced subject to talk about.
So if you could give people, first responders, one tip when they feel fear, because there are many tips in your book, you go through it, not just first responders, but for people in general. But this episode is specifically kind of geared towards first responders. So if you could give them one tip to help mitigate fear when they are on a critical incident, what would you say?
So the heart is the key, right? Because if you're going to have to make decisions, if you're feeling fear, your body's going to respond to that. And there's a whole host of physiological effects when you're feeling fear, because you're adrenaline and cortisol dump into your body. Your heart's going to start racing. That causes tunnel vision, loss of fine motor skills, like a whole variety of things that happen. So controlling that body response will clear the fog of war and free up your decision making so you can make better decisions. And the way you can do that is through breathing. So, and there's so much I talk about in my book as far as breath work and different like ways to do it, but just slow, controlled breaths. You're taking back control of your body, because when you're afraid, you're taking quick, shallow breaths. So deep, slow breaths. You can do box breathing, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. Doing that a couple of times will help mitigate your body's response to that fear. And you're because the fear hijacks some of your body's responses, you're taking that back. If I was going to say one good tip for that, that's where I would start. And then you can get into all the other things that we talk about and what I teach.
And I think that's that's the number one starting point, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're controlling that response, slowing
so that you can think clearly, so that you can make decisions, right?
Yeah, because when your body starts to take over, you're no longer thinking clearly, and you have to try and gain some of that control back. So, well, I think that's good for part 1.
Yeah.
And thank you for listening today. If you enjoy the podcast, please share it with a friend or subscribe or leave a review. And you can learn more about fear and how to respond to it in the book, The Courage to Live, which you can find on Amazon. You just search The Courage to Live by Josh Bitsko. And thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you.